What is good, YouTube? Elijah here, back with another video. Sorry for the long hiatus. I'm finally back. I was just focusing on IRL stuff and amping. But what if I told you that there is a way to scale Dragon Ball to outerversal without the otherworld scaling, the arrow scaling, or any of that bullshit? And this is going to be specifically indicative, as you saw from the thumbnail, of the Goku Black arc. And we know the Goku Black arc, to start off, is the start of the battle that transcends time and space, and this was stated by Toriyama himself, so it's more likely that what I'm going to argue to be the case. Now, for the first argument that I would like to rationalize, which revolves around Goku Black, is just going to be that premise number one: Goku Black's understanding externally fully encompasses time and space, as well as the theoretical conceptions of it. Why? Because this scan here verbatim states that he's seen the truth of this world and all things in it. And why is this claim true, people may ask? Because it's consistent with reality and verifiably true that the Kaioshins and the gods that pertain to them look down on the entirety of the universe and oversee and overlook all the intents of it. It's their job that they hold the artistic commitment to. And what brings more consistency to this claim being true is the fact that Goku Black verbatim states that he looks down on existence from a higher perspective than the mortals do, which is indicative of the fact that the Kaioshins oversee and look on the lower creation, which is the universe and entailments within the universe, and they are the gods of creation. So that's why premise number one is true. And then premise number two, there exists a summit, and this summit is the summit that Goku Black cut into with his scythe, which he further concludes is that premise number three, the summit is beyond Goku Black's understanding externally. And premise number four, anything beyond Goku Black's understanding externally is also beyond the concepts of time and space, as well as the theoretical conceptions of it. And therefore the summit is beyond the concepts of time and space, as well as the theoretical conceptions of it. Now, this argument is obviously going to have a deductively valid structure. When it says that it's beyond his understanding, he's not saying, it's not indicative of the fact that he doesn't know what x is. For example, I don't know what 50 times 5 is, or what is 5 minus 50. Because when Black peers into the summit, he concludes that it's higher than neither man or God has explored yet. That's making a general claim, referencing these entities. And we know that God and man, such as Trunks, has explored outside of the timelines and has transcended time and space to go to another timeline. And Goku Black has also transcended time and space to go to another timeline. If you were to deny this, then you would be affirming a contradiction, because there's a world, parallel world, in the parallel time space where Goku is dead, and in the present parallel world or time space, Goku's alive. So you'd be affirming that Goku is both dead and alive at the same time, which would entail a contradiction. And that is if someone is affirming that there's only one timeline in Dragon Ball, and that they don't necessarily need to transcend time and space to access another timeline or parallel world. If this summit is higher than neither man or God has explored yet, and the man and God has explored outside of time and space, it would be beyond or transcends the exploration which takes precedent outside of time and space. And why is this true? Well, it's verifiably true and correspondent with reality, because when we see Trunks in the parallel world transporter, we see him traveling or exploring, which can be defined as traveling outside the parallel worlds to access another timeline, which I already elaborated. You would necessarily need to transcend time and space to do that. Now, when Toriyama stated, going back to that scan, when Toriyama stated that it's the start of the battle that transcends time and space, even if you want to presuppose that it could be the case that it's just in reference to the gods and mortals, such as Trunks, going outside in the timelines and transcending space and time, you would have to concede that the summit, based off the argument I provided, transcends time and space, or it's beyond time and space, which analytically follows that this summit that Goku Black cut into, the lowest you could lowball this to without accounting for outerversal otherworld scaling or arrow scaling, because she's able to just explore outside of the fucking fictional paper, and she's able to supersede her narrative. And she is canon, by the way. But even if we presuppose that all of that is false, bare minimum, the lowest downplaying you could argue this to be is this 5D. Now, I'm gonna explain why this is specifically outer, based off the earlier argument as well. After the claim was made about, quote unquote, I've seen the truth of this world, which is the present tense claim, and this universe and all things in it, we see it zooming out to the world, and shortly after, the universe adding literal emphasis to the claim, and all is a universal quantification which predicates all things existing within the universe. And the external validations for this synthetical claim being the case is the fact that the Kaoshins are already elaborated, and Gowasu, yada yada yada, they already perceive and oversee the entirety of the universe, which already validates that proposition. Which I said earlier, the god's job is to oversee and look down upon the mortal realm, which furthermore validates that proposition. And Goku Black even adding his little emphasis earlier, meaning that the statement in question is not hyperbolic. And more consistency as to why it's not hyperbolic is the fact that Goku Black verbatim states that he looks down on existence from a higher perspective than they do, which is true by virtue of what the Kaoshins do, which I already explained, yada yada, and are the gods of creation who created the universe's entailments. So by virtue, this statement would be externally validated and analytically includes space-time and the theoretical conceptions of it as well, because that is something that encompasses the universe, and that is something that exists within the universe, which he perceives as well. Now, if he cut into a summit that is higher than all of that, including his understanding regarding this particular realm externally, that follows that the summit supersedes what he perceives externally, which is space-time and the theoretical conceptions of it, which follows that the summit is also beyond the theoretical conceptions of time and space, because that's something within Goku Black's understanding by virtue. So that's going to justify and prove my argument. An example of this would be, imagine that you have an absolute understanding of a box and all the entailments within the box, but you're within a box, and you cut into some sort of summit that leads outside of the box, which is also beyond your understanding, and your understanding would hold logical equivalence to the entirety of the box and the geometrical properties. If that mental state corresponds to external reality, then by virtue, we can infer that the summit, which represents the sky in this analogy, is outside the entirety of the box and all the entailments within it, which represents the universe and all things in it, including the concepts of time and space, as well as the theoretical conceptions of it, which is why by virtue the summit is something that is outerversal. Now, people try to provide contradictions to this. They would try to argue that this is contradiction. For example, someone would say, if he's seen the truth of this world and this universe and all things in it, that didn't tell a contradiction, because he didn't know what two entities were going to do, or a fusion dance that pertains to those two entities, so that's a contradiction. Well, that isn't the case, because I've seen is perfect present tense and doesn't reference specific consequences that would pertain to specific entities, for example A and B. Imagine people on a start line on a track, and that represents space-time and the theoretical conceptions of it, and they start running. That doesn't entail that the person who perceives the track at that specific instance, which represents time and space or dimensionality, and attains the image of it, is going to necessarily know who comes in first place at the end of the finish line. So that wouldn't entail a contradiction. And when you see or perceive X, you attain awareness of what X is. For example, if I see or perceive a red ball, I'm going to attain awareness of some of the properties or all the properties of the red ball. For example, it being round analytically, or any type of mental image of what X is. So therefore, I've proven analytically that Goku Black is outerversal. He can scale the outerversal. And I've also proven in another argument that it is more likely the case that he is outerversal. If you believe someone being outerversal in fiction, if you want to argue that low tier shit that it's logically impossible to be outerversal in fiction, doesn't matter. It would still be 5D, and it could be upscaled if I accounted for all the sub-dimensions and higher sub-dimensions within the living realm. But I didn't use Otherworld. I didn't use the subspace, which has no concept of time. I didn't use any aerial scaling when I can, which I'm being generous. So I hope you guys like and subscribe. Join my AMP server. It's gonna be in the link in the description, as well as the Kamikage server, which is also gonna be in the link in the description.